a realist is more than happy to try to show his math about why something is necessary from a security standpoint, especially because if you're making arguments that are not consistent with our security but are actually for pecuniary interests, you're actually undermining your prosperity and your ultimately your security by doing that. And so bad economic ideas, even under the guise of national security, are still bad, and realists should reject them. And fortunately, economics as a science can help us better understand what are the good economic arguments and the bad ones. And I was actually heartened several years ago, speaking of this, is when Admiral Mike Mullin, who is at the time was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? And he was asked, what's our biggest security threat? And I feel like I kind of failed. I've been studying this my whole life, and I would have given a less good answer than him. I mean, I might have said something like, well, there's a lot of threat inflation in the world, and we shouldn't get, too exercised. But if you're asking me to rank order threats, even if they're not as big as other people think, here's what I would think they would be. Like, look, terrorism is still a threat. It's not something that we should change, our whole domestic society on. But yeah, we ought to be careful about that. And I think we should use special operations forces to go after terrorist groups that have an intent and a capability to harm us. And then I might have said China because it's a long-term strategic adversary. But Mike Mullin gave a better answer. What he said is our greatest national security threat are debt and deficits.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, stumped, right? That's a fantastic answer.
Every Tea Party activist I knew, including myself, would quote General Mullin on this because Admiral.
Yeah.
And because we were in the midst of this fight. You remember at the height of the Tea Party, there was this mechanism by which Republicans had nominally agreed to trim defense spending, and Democrats had nominally agreed to trim domestic spending.
A positive log roll.
And and this was unusual, right? And turns out it was extremely unsustainable because Tea Party Republicans, with a few important exceptions, ultimately caved to the idea that we needed to fully fund the wars.
Right.
And of course, wars are a black hole.
Oh,
and particularly if you want to fund the war on terror, that's a money pit that never ends. So it was the Achilles heel of this entire movement to be fiscally responsible and to meet that what Admiral Mullin said, that like if we want to be safe and we want to be secure and we want to be strong as a nation, we better get our fiscal house in order.
Absolutely.
So I feel like and again, I'm sliding into, I think, very realist arguments that would go back to Washington about not spending money you don't have on wars that you can't afford.
And that aren't necessary.
And
right.
By the way, you're going to make the world less safe if you do that. And this kind of goes into your tradition at AIER, because how do we finance unnecessary wars? We print money.
Exactly.
Well, we borrow money.
Yes.
And then when we can't borrow any more money, we start asking the Treasury to help us out.
Yeah, and we ultimately undermine our own strength. And that's what I found so great about Admiral Mullin's comment there, is he hit the nail on the head, right? If you want to conform to a kind of higher realism, you need to make sure you have an economy that can support at a relatively low percentage of GDP your safety.